Motion for approval. Motion by Cywert, second by Essex. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, this morning we're going to have a presentation on water conservation. We're going to ask Kent Askren to come forward and he'll give us an idea of what we're in for. Good morning, Kent.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, I'm Kent Askren, Public Policy Director for Kansas Farm Bureau. Thank you for a little bit of your time this morning. For those of you familiar with Kansas Farm Bureau, I think you know we're a grassroots organization, all 105 counties in Kansas, and we also have the state divided into 10 districts. Within those 10 districts, there are ag advisory committees that help shape the policy of Kansas Farm Bureau on a yearly basis, and one of those committees is the Water Committee, which I am fortunate enough to be able to be a part of. And we have a very good group of folks that wrestle with many of the difficult water challenges that you all hear here on a daily basis or a yearly basis. And so with the chairman's indulgence, he's allowed us a few minutes for a few of our members to come forward this morning and share with you some of the challenges that they face in their operations and their part of the state. We have with us this morning members from West Central, Southwest, South, and Southeast. So we have a pretty good cross-section of the state represented, and they've come from all across the state to be here this morning. We do have a couple on WebEx this morning because of the weather, of course, that has come in this morning and this evening that interfered with them actually being able to be here in person. So I would yield to our committee members to come up, Mr. Chairman, allow them to introduce themselves, a little bit about their operation. I believe we're going to start on WebEx, but if you have any questions, be sure and let me know. But again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Kent. Representative Featherston's on WebEx this morning, I believe. And if committee members need to leave to testify before Senate committees today, they're just going to be in and out, I believe. Our first presenter will be Kathleen Schultz from Osborne County on WebEx. Kathleen, are you there?
I am. Good morning, Chairman Minix and members of the Water Committee. The opportunity to visit with you today is key to understanding water across the state. I appreciate you giving Kansas Farm Bureau Water Committee the time to share with you. I am Kathleen Schultz from Osborne County. My husband and I are seventh generation farmers in rural Osborne County, and my knowledge of agriculture has been valuable in my career in the crop insurance industry. We have a diverse operation of raising crops and running a cow-calf operation. We are grateful to be raising our family in the midst of agriculture. My passion for water began in 2015 when our community found ourselves in crisis. After persistent drought, many hauled water to livestock as a result of diminishing surface water resources. We began discussions with Farm Bureau and Post Rock Rural Water District. Our efforts at the time were not able to develop a partnership of accessible water for homes and livestock. For our home alone, tying into the water district was an estimated investment of over $30,000 at just 1 mile away. We made it through, but the foundation of not having a dependable source of water continues to be a point of concern. Today, more restrictions exist. Our local county water district is not accepting applications for livestock. Home applications are available, but with limitations to use as a cap of 10,000 gallons a month. The average person uses 300 gallons a day, which would indicate that a family of 4 would exceed the parameters for water usage in my local water district. Their water source is located from Post Rock Water District, who is currently evaluating with an engineer their capacity, and applications are not open. At this point, to Post Rock, there are 43 inquiries that are in queue. In addition to accessible water, we also face concerns of quality water. We have gotten water sample testing, but that's not necessarily an easy task. Water kits are available, but I know few who are actually ensure the safety of their water kit samples are available, but I know few who actually ensure the safety of their water drinking. We helped someone local run a test, and it required implementation of a complex system due to the levels of hardness and nitrates found from the results of the test. When we built our home in 2013, we installed a reverse osmosis system and a whole water home softener system. House Bill 2113 outlines for funding to be directed toward domestic water supply testing, and I commend you for your investment in ensuring quality water for Kansas. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. In House Bill 2302, we put in there some provisions for two county conservation districts, at least two, to get together and apply for a grant for, with the idea that, water would be an issue. The first thing that comes to my mind, and at least in our part of the country, would be pond clean out during drought. Has there been the conservation districts done any action toward that area in your area, and what is your source of water there?
Most people use well water, but we are very shallow to water because we are not connected with any, the Ogallala water source or any of that. And so we rely on surface water and domestic water locally. There are 3 water districts close to me. Post Rock is one of Osborne Rural Water number 1, Osborne Rural Water number 2, and then there's a Rooks County Rural Water District that is not far from my location as well. I do know I couldn't give you statistics on how many people are using funds to help clean out ponds and ensure, but I know that with the drought and those sources being dry, many people are trying to maximize the capacity of those water sources.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen.
Appreciate your time.
We'll go next to Ryan Janitel of Wallace County.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and other committee members here today. Apologize for not being there in person in the weather that it's as temperamental as it is. I have a little background information on myself. I am a 4th generation farmer and rancher, 2nd generation in Wallace County. I'm here this morning to discuss local input of water in my area, which is Groundwater Management District 1. Water use is the lifeblood of economic drivers in Groundwater Management District 1. An economic driver being an industry that supports the local economy in my area. The economic driver that uses the most water is irrigated farmland, most of which grows the feed to supply other economic drivers in our area. There is a balance for which water is used, and the size of these economic drivers need to be reached. Without water, neither is a stable industry. With that in mind, in recent years, a LEMA, or Local Enhancement Management Area, was created to conserve and make water stable for everyone in GMD1. A little background on the benefits of this LEMA. The first of being which the changes in farming practices, mostly the tillage, going to more conservation practices of no-till, along with crop rotations. The second being the mindsets changing, how the water's used, how efficiently it's used, and when to put the water on certain crops instead of just turning a well on and turning it off at the end of the season. The third and final and largest one would be a future of stability in our area. Without water, we would not be a very economically sound area, or the people here wouldn't be very sound. So through more efficient practices, along with the technologies using less water to grow the crops, feed the industries that use them. However, the balance of the water use between economic drivers is changing. While water is decreasing for irrigated farmland, other industries are growing. between new industries that are coming and existing ones that are increasing. It's shifting the water consumption, along with needing to feed to sustain these industries, which creates a conundrum of water being reduced in one place to be able to fuel another. What I will ask everyone here today is to look at conservation across the entirety of an area, not just certain industries. And with that, I yield to any questions that anyone will have of the committee. Thank you.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Ryan. How are things out in Wallace County this morning?
Very windy, very windy. Not quite as much moisture as we had hoped, but hopefully it's coming soon. So.
Well, any moisture out there is well received and well welcomed. Thank you for your testimony this morning. I wanted to, you visited a little bit about no-till. I guess I would like to just ask you, what are some technologies, either through seed genetics or tillage or even irrigation technologies that you use in your farm, and what are some of the things that you're looking at in the future that could help conserve the water usage for irrigation?
Well, going a little bit more to the past, farmland was generally worked once. Then in the springtime, application of fertilizer was put on it, worked again, then possibly worked again before planting season. And each one of those operations tended to take 1 to 2 inches of moisture out of the soil every time they were done. Anymore, there's even been more of a shift. There used to be strip till in our area quite a bit. That's even shifting to complete no-till, where no tillage is being done in the soil. So hopefully that water retention in the soil of those wasted inches of moisture aren't being done. And in our farm, we're shifting to 100% no-till on irrigated ground for sure. Trying to maximize the water efficiency and how it's being used and put down, and looking towards the future through different ways of how irrigation packages on pivots are used. Drops have been in our area for a long time and being used, but more tests to do efficiencies on wells and also different tech pieces that are used on the pivots to possibly shut them off when it rains, so less water is used and multiplied. And hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I was just kind of looking because, you start out with the most basic fundamentals of conservation. Every time you turn that soil, a lot of that moisture evaporates. So the more or the less tillage you can do and the more cover you can provide, the residue on top of that really, in western Kansas, that accounts for a lot of the water conservation. So thanks again for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, Ryan. You said you're in GMD1 and you're just a couple years into a Lima, which reduced the amount of water that you could pump. What's the attitude of the general ag producers in that area with the advent of the Lima that's happened in your area?
Well, I would say the biggest shift is knowing there's kind of a cap to how much water is being used, and I would say we're for sure in a transitional area, especially where we're at, of the mindsets of realizing, the first 2 years maybe being, kind of similar to the past 5 years, but this year has really been a year that everybody's kind of really looked at what they've used in the past 2 years, and really going to have to either squeeze down or come up with some new ideas for the years to come, just because of how dry we were and how much water we did end up using in the past 2 years. So I would say that the mindsets of how the water is being used, and a lot of people in the first year ended up, if they were corn on corn ground of maximizing water use every year, they went to more of a crop rotation where wheat was involved, where they tried to cut the water use down by about half to begin with. But we are still evaluating as every year goes on, and it's definitely changed the outlook of how water is consumed, and everybody is keeping a closer eye for sure. So I hope that answered your question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, somewhat. Kathleen earlier said her water was extremely shallow in the Osborne area. There, I'm assuming you're south of Weston?
I'm south of Sharon Springs, correct, but we farm south of Weston all the way to south of Wallace.
Okay, so how deep is it to shale, and how much has your water table changed in the last few years?
Well, a matter of fact, to shell depends. You go farther east, it's about 200 feet. Farther west towards Weston, it's upwards of 400 to 450 feet to shell. Where we live, a matter of fact, on our home place here, it's 260 to shell. And as a reference, yesterday we actually measured the water level, and within a year's time, we have been stable within a half a foot of water consumption in the last year. However, in the last 10 years, there has been a loss of footage of around 8 foot, but it varies depending on the regeneration of the aquifer. So hopefully that answers your question closer. If not, I can elaborate more on specifics.
Thank you. Representative Helwig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just got a question. You're talking about being in Alema and having to reduce your water usage and stuff. I'm from the eastern side of the state. Can you tell me what your water usage is and then kind of how many pivots would be in your Lima in that area?
Our Lima is of 5 counties: Lane, Scott, Wichita, Greeley, and Wallace County. I would say half of Wallace County. The north half would be part of, farther north would be part of GMD4. But as far as water consumption, it goes off of acre feet generally, and we use it as more of a inches that we put down, kind of to look at it over our certain acres. So being an acre foot, it means a foot of water over an acre of land. And that's kind of what we use as a reference of how much water is being consumed. Over our entire area, as far as pivots, I wouldn't be able to have exact number for sure, but I would say it's in the hundreds, if not maybe the 1,000 mark. But I would have to refer back to somebody else, I guess, on exact numbers, or GMD one probably would have that answer. So hopefully that answered your question, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Helwig, what's your annual rainfall?
40 inches, so.
Ryan, what's your average rainfall?
An average in our area is 17. The last couple of years has been sub 10. So
Okay.
So-
Go ahead.
So what was your acre feet then usage that you say you're running through a pivot every year when you're on corn or versus wheat?
I would say in our operation, over a certain pivot, it would be around 14 to 18 inches of water maybe put on. Wheat is probably around that 8 to 9 inches of water consumption, all dependent on rainfall, of course. After this Lima, we are closer to that 10 to 13 inch mark as an average of our 5 years, at least in our operation. So hopefully that kind of gives a more clear answer. If there is more clarity that needs to be done, GMD1, I know that people there would be happy to answer any of those questions too.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We'll go next to Jarvis Garrettson from Haskell County.
Committee. Oh, thank you, Chairman Minix and committee. I'm Jarvis Garrettson. I'm a 4th-generation farmer in Haskell County and a 3rd-generation irrigator in Haskell County. I'm a member of Kansas Farm Bureau and currently serving on the Kansas Farm Bureau Water Committee. And thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. Haskell County is in the middle of GMD3 in southwest Kansas. It consistently ranks number 1 or number 2 in the state when it comes to the dollars of agriculture value generated. The county that shares the other spot with Haskell County is Finney County. So in GMD3, we have the 2 highest ag value generating counties in the state. We bounce between 900 million to just over $1 billion of ag value generated in each county every year. That's largely due to water, obviously, and the livestock industry that resides in southwest Kansas. We also have a large ethanol industry, and then our irrigated crops are the largest users of the water. Growing up, helping my father and grandfather irrigate crops, I've seen firsthand the peak of irrigation in Haskell County, and I've seen the steady decline in irrigated acres over the years. Without a doubt in my mind, I've only seen one time, and I'm 52, been in it my whole life, one time where I can actually honestly say I think I saw a farmer being wasteful with irrigation water, and that was before water meters were required. So that would have been in the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s. We've always strived as irrigators to be stewards of the resources that we have, whether it's the ever short dollar, fertilizer, herbicides, our soils, especially our water. We just cannot afford to be wasteful with any of those resources, especially water. My grandfather was told in the early days of development that the Ogallala Aquifer was an inexhaustible supply of fresh water. And in the early days of development, I believe the statement was true and correct. After all, you might have had one straw in the cup sucking on the aquifer, not thousands. We also had in the early days 4-inch pumps. Well, thank you World War II and development in the turbine pump. Now we have 12-inch to 16-inch pumps. Don't utilize those capacities anymore, but you can see how the draw on the aquifer grew exponentially. My neighbors to the north, the Moores, were established in Haskell County in the late 1880s. They were the first ones in the area, and my great-grandfather carried water from their windmill for the first 2 years of his establishment in 1902. Moores had the first well in the area, HS03, vested right 3 in Haskell County. And that was utilized to ensure enough feed for the milk cows to get through the winter. It wasn't about raising crops and gaining dollars. It was to ensure that the milk cow could survive till spring. And if my memory is right from the stories, they irrigated 40 acres of feed. The biggest development in Haskell County came from 1965 to 1985, 20 years as the biggest, fastest development in Haskell County. Along with the development, our mild climate brought the livestock industry, the largest economic driver in southwest Kansas. Farmers and businessmen, we grow what's in demand. That's how we all pay our bills. Supply and demand dictates what we grow. We would love to raise widgets if we could net more dollars raising widgets. But with the hog industry, the livestock industry, dairy, ethanol plants, the demand is corn. And that's what pays the bills the most. Then it also turns out that corn is a very efficient converter of water to bushels of grain. The sad part is it takes about 10 inches of water to get to the first bushel. After that, it's a very efficient converter of water to bushels. I've got a neighbor 3 years ago, has 3 circles and 1 well. So he can't pump enough water for 3 circles of corn. So he irrigated 2 circles of corn, sort of irrigated, if you will, and he raised 200 bushels to the acre. His 3rd circle, he put to wheat. He put the same gallons or acre feet of water per acre on his wheat as he did his corn. And he had a tremendous wheat crop, raised 112 bushels of wheat on the same inches. So corn in that scenario is almost a 2-to-1 converter of water to bushels. But what have we done as irrigators through the years to be good stewards of water, the most precious resource? We used to flood irrigate, which was berms about every 100 to 300 feet wide in my part of the county, and you just open ditch irrigation, you just pump the water down the ditch, siphon tubes between the berms, and where it went, it went. Well, we saw that wasn't a uniform application, and so we went to furrow irrigation, small ditches with small berms every 30 to 40 inches, depending on your side slope or how flat your ground was. That greatly increased our application uniformity across the entire field. Then we converted from open ditch irrigation to gated pipe. We now didn't have blowouts. We didn't have tumbleweeds blowing into the open ditch and causing breakouts and then water running down the headland, down the ditch, until you got it remedied. So gated pipe was another great saver. Increased our efficiency of application. And we stayed with gated pipe irrigation for many years. Well, we thought that was hard to improve on. Well, somebody developed a surge valve. There's an automated valve that switched water one side, and you would surge irrigate, and then 6 hours later it would switch the valve, and then it would do a different set. Well, that let where you were before seal off, and then it would surge back over another 6 hours later, and you could get water to the end of the field more efficiently. Then we have center pivots irrigation. And in the sand hills around south of Garden City, they were irrigating sand hills. I mean, it's ups and downs, definitely not suited for furrow or berm irrigation. And they were high pressure. The impacts were overhead, a lot of evaporation, but at the time, plenty of water, and it made non-productive sand very productive for alfalfa and corn, primarily alfalfa. We've since gone to center pivots with drop nozzles that are anything from knee-high to maybe thigh-high above the soil. We also, in the area, some have gone to dragging like soaker hoses. I think I saw a video where maybe it was Representative Pishney demonstrated, showed the orange dragon line. But basically it's a soaker hose for your garden that's drug along behind, and that helps decrease evaporation. We also have subsurface drip irrigation. So that's wonderful. It's zero irrigation or zero evaporation. However, maintenance can be a nightmare if you have rodents that like to go look for a water source during the winter. We have improved technologies in our satellite imagery. We have soil moisture test probes to help us monitor our soil moisture levels. We have apps on our phone to control our sprinklers. We can speed them up, slow them down, change direction. I mean, all of this technology is wonderful, but it's also allowing us to pump the last drop. I said I'm in the middle of GMD3, and I know that GMD3's, been under the magnifying lens for a while. And what have they done? Well, GMD3 did push for flow meters back in the 80s, required to be on every well. My dad was serving on the GMD3 board when that happened, and he was against it. He said, we already have a flow meter. It's called a natural gas meter. And for us, that was the truth. But you had somebody on wellhead gas, basically free natural gas, so free fuel to pump. Well, they had not much incentive to pay attention to how many hours the motor ran. So the flow meters came in, and I think that was absolutely fantastic. We now, because of that data, have some of the best information to research and study to help us make decisions going forward. GMD3 checks our flow meters every year, unannounced. They send somebody around and just inspect. Is it pumping? At what rate? What's the totalizer? Does it look like it's functioning properly? And they leave a tag that says no action needed or action needs taken. So they're actively involved every year during the pumping season to inspect every flow meter in GMD3. The Kansas Farm Bureau policy supports the GMD Act and encourages its members to be active and involved in their local GMDs. KFB's grassroots members have voted on policy that believes, coming this June, in the 80-year-old Kansas water law. First in time, first in right. My family was involved in a lawsuit that confirmed through the state's court system that first in time, first in right is the Kansas water law. This committee has come to the conclusion, or the Kansas Water Committee, that strict administration of Kansas water law for reductions is not the answer. That would be devastating to the communities, farms, businesses, not only in western Kansas, but for the entire state as well. With that said, a solution for making these reductions so that all water right participants will take some effort. A possible solution at its simplest form is vested rights pre-1945, zero cut. Well, that sounds kind of ridiculous that they wouldn't take any reductions. There aren't very many vested rights, and they were pre-water law. So in my point of view, they would take a zero cut in their certificated allotment. The most senior right might be reduced by X times 25%. So if there's a total reduction per acre, then it would be their water right. So that number times 25% off of their certificated amount. The most junior right would be that same X times 75%. And then the one in the middle would be 50%. That way it keeps the spirit of first in time, first in right in place, but yet everybody will still participate in the cuts. These reductions must be on the certificated amount on the water right, not historical use. The reason for that is historical use benefits those that have pushed their water right limit as much as they could every year. It already kicks the person in the gut or the teeth who's taken conservation steps to reduce their usage. Or maybe it's somebody like my grandmother who's 99 and has decided at 99 she's pretty confident she's not going to see a 30-year return if she redrills her well. So she's elected, there's formation below, but she's elected not to because it's thought economical for her. Makes sense. Well, but instead of pumping 800 gallons a minute, if she were to redrill, she's pumping 300 gallons a minute. And for her, that works because she's at the end of her lifespan. So that's why it needs to be off of certificated allotments. Every water right has a certificated allotment with it. Some are 24 inches, some are 20 inches, some are 12 inches. It varies across the state. But that way the owner of that water right knows their starting point. And I know the first statement or comments like, well, but that's just going to be a paper cut. You know, it's a cut only on paper, not real water savings. And arguably correct. But if the methodology is in place, now we can determine after 2 years or 5 years, does another cut need to be made? Well, we've done it once. Here's the methodology that worked. Here's the next round of cuts. As a reduction in pumping happens to stabilize the aquifer, the most important is that all 14 types of beneficial water rights will participate in the cuts. Every water right owner, irregardless of the type of beneficial use. So not only irrigators. Agreed, irrigators pump 85, 90% of the water. The biggest savings and cuts will be from that group. But our Kansas water law gives no priority and no preference to the type of beneficial use. That means recreation water right has the same preference, the same priority as industry. as municipalities, as irrigators. The only differential is the file number for seniority. So all beneficial users must participate. Take the Sheridan 6 LEMA as an example. Kansas Farm Bureau supports LEMAs, and they're very, very good. It's local, highly encouraged, but we also believe in Kansas water law, and that's where every beneficial use must participate and not give preference to one use over another. In Sheridan 6, only irrigators cut, and that doesn't follow Kansas water law. And that's where Kansas Farm Bureau has, that's the one little slice of the LEMA that we don't agree with, because it didn't involve all water right users. But if somebody takes a cut and decides they can't live with that cut, well, there's an open market out there. It's just not utilized hardly ever, but it is. If I, the irrigator, get cut 12 inches, I can't live with that. I need, for what I do, I need 6 of those inches back. What do? I would suggest you start knocking on your neighbor's doors and saying, are you willing to sell me your water right? It's a private property right. Can be sold separate of the ground. If somebody's willing to pay enough money, it's for sale. Or, and I know there's some legalities of out of the same sources of supply, but as long as there's a participant within the GMD, I think that water market should be developed and utilized. It's just, we see it on rare occasion when municipalities typically, not always, but typically buy an irrigated right next to town so that they can ensure water for their town. And the farmer sells that water right to the municipality, they quit irrigating, and the city's happy because they have water and go through the proper procedures and paperwork. So there is a methodology for different types of use that maybe think they can't get by with less, to buy, rent, lease back to where they need. So with that, I think we can all work together to come up with a solution as to how to make these reductions happen. But it's first in time, first and right is Kansas water law, and there is no priority or preference given to one type over another. With that, it's time for any questions.
Any questions? Representative White?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Jarvis.
You too.
How are you doing today?
Doing well, better than I deserve.
What around Sublette, what was the drop of the Ogallala this year?
This year,
Last year? Or,
it varies, but this year was right at 2 feet. And historically, we've been 2 foot a year. We've seen as high as 7 and 8 feet in a single year. Historically, we're just under 2 to just over 2 feet a year.
Thank you. And one more. You mentioned something about drilling deeper. There's another water source deeper. Have any of your neighbors gone down and done that?
Yes, so in our area of Haskell County, we do have shale in some areas, and others it's undefined. And so where I live, we're give or take just really a few feet, 450 to 460 feet to shale. 6 miles to the west, you can drill to 800 feet and there's still no shale. Now, there's not much water down there, but test holes have been drilled, and the best formations more or less stop around 420 or 520 feet deep. You'll find a few places go to 600, but the vast majority, 480 to 500 feet is kind of where people are deciding the economic benefit stops.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Droege.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I was curious what negatives or headwinds you foresee in like doing these things that you're talking about with the water rights and cutting people's use.
Nobody wants a cut, right? I mean, we all see it in the state. We got a budget and we need to cut it. Cut everybody but me, right? And that's why I've said everybody has to participate. So there's going to be heartburn, without a doubt. But at least in my area, the irrigators know it is the state's water. I, as an irrigator, as a water right, I hold a piece of paper that grants me access to it. And there's a little bit of a feeling in my immediate area that, can we just be done with all the talking? Just tell me how much I'm going to be cut and let me start deciding my management for the next year, because, you know, we as irrigators, we lose water every year, whether we want to admit it or not. So we're taking a cut. It's just because it's not there to pump anymore. And so we manage every year. There's fewer acres of corn grown now. There's more acres of wheat and triticale and what I would consider off-season irrigating. And that helps offset, but wheat does not generate the income dollars that corn does, or alfalfa, or milo. So it's, yeah, there's going to be heartburn, and, you know, I don't envy the position of the state at all, but if we want the aquifer to extend and conserve and at some point become Q-stable, which a lot of farmers are like, well, whatever that means. You know, there's just tell me I'm going to be cut 20%. Now, I want to know, is that from my certificated allotment or my historical use? And if it's from my historical use, I'm going to be upset because my neighbor, who didn't conserve for the last 10 years, has pumped every gallon he possibly could, got the benefit. And here I tried to be a good steward, or a better steward perceptually than my neighbor, and that's where the big heartburn is going to be, is if it's off a historical use. And then you get some people like, nope, it has to be off a historical use because that's the only way to truly save wet water instead of only on paper. And that's where I foresee, you know, instead of maybe if it's going to be off of certificated allotments, maybe the cut needs to be 40% instead of 20. Well, that's going to scare a lot of people right off the bat. But that's the only way that, in my simple farmer mind, that's the baseline. Everybody can look at their each water right and know where they're starting from.
We need to move along. Appreciate it, Jarvis. We've got 3 more presenters, and if we have remaining time, I want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to talk. If we have time at the end, we'll allow a few more questions. But thank you very much. I'm enjoying this discussion here. Next, we have Justin Volsberg of Stafford County.
Good morning. Representative Minix and the Water Committee, I really appreciate you letting me talk here in front of you today. I'm Justin Vosberg. I'm a 5th-generation farmer. My wife and I run this farm that was started in 1891. I have 2 sons home with me farming at this point. We want to be able to get the picture up or not, Kent? Or they've got, okay. I want to plug Kansas Farm Bureau here for a minute and Ken Askren. Okay, I got on this water committee about 1.5 years ago, and it has been eye-opening. I mean, he has somebody from every part of the state on this committee. We all have different problems. We all have different issues, whether it's reservoirs, taking water from municipalities out of a stream versus the western Kansas and the declining aquifers. It is amazing. But I will tell you, this committee has one thing in common, and it is conservation. There is nobody on this committee that wants to pump the last drop of water out of this state. And that's a great thing. First groundwater pumping on our farm didn't start with an irrigation system. It started in the mid-1950s when we had to go drill a windmill south of my house, 6 miles. The red dot is my house, and that's where I live in Stafford County, because the Rattlesnake Creek run dry in the mid-1950s. our first irrigation wells come in the 1960s when we started developing irrigation. As a property right owner, an irrigation right owner, I'm concerned about some potential unintended strains on our water supply. Okay. My house is the red dot there. In our GMD5, we have 2 igucas. We have Cavera National Wildlife Reservation. We have an EIS study currently pending. We're waiting the results. My neighbors and I are in a water predicament. Downstream from us, we have a reliable source, a rechargeable groundwater aquifer. KGS says, this is a 2023 study, we are within 1.6% of sustainability in GMD number 5. Pretty good shape. We have a senior water right on the bottom end that needs more water. The big issue is our seasonal use of water with irrigation conflicts with their seasonal demands. That's the issue. Augmentation, thank you. You guys got it through in the Water Committee several years ago. It is the best solution for the impairment they face. Upstream, we face diminished flows. Improve conservation practices, don't let water to the stream. The decline of the aquifer in the west. We have a new supplemental area of concern. It's marked there on the bottom of the map that we found out 12 days ago at our local GMD meeting. I'm concerned new business to the west of us, or expanded business, may increase historic water use in that area. We are caught in the middle in Stafford County. Downstream, we're facing cuts to a senior water right. Upstream, we're facing new businesses, expanding businesses. When a new business comes in to change the water right, they go to the Division of Water Resources, sat down with Lane Letourneau, Chairman or Earl Lewis, and they look at the water rights that maybe this new business has purchased, okay? It's an agriculture water right in lots of instances. There's some consumptive use values in statute that they have to take consideration. They cut those water uses back. That is fine. It's the way it's supposed to work. My concern is away from that new water right, that new business. Is there going to be a change in cropping practices by the other water rights around it? Are they going to go with dollars to other farmers around it? They need raw materials. Offer them more money for them to increase their historical use in this business. Is this a business that maybe downstream from where their business is, they take it to another business that finishes their product? That business has a water right. If they're only using it at 60% or so, sure. We'll take your product, we'll finish it for you, we'll increase our historical use. My fear is we're not communicating within our government. I understand economic development. I'm all for economic development. I'm all for putting an inch of water to its greatest value in our area. But when we're faced with the situation we're faced, we need to be careful that we're not, with new businesses, increasing historical use. That is my concern. And within that, Jarvis said it well. I'll say it a little more blunt. Are we using preferential treatment to bring these new businesses into the state? We need our people at the top of the state. We need them talking to our county commissioners. We need them talking to the GMD5. I'm all for big announcements for big business, bringing new people and this and that. But we have a scarce resource here. We need to make sure we know when we bring that new business in that we're not going to increase historical water use, therefore exacerbating the problem we already have. Now, I would be in a failure today if I did not thank you guys for what you've done for my community and myself. There's been a lot of tools come through this committee in the past. MIFAs, LEMAs, Central Kansas Water Bank Association, augmentation, all tools to help an irrigator like myself conserve water and do a better job with it. I will stand for questions now.
Any questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. And I completely agree. I think there needs to be more communication between Department of Commerce, the Water Office, and local entities when we talk about new development and use of water rights in Kansas. I just want to make sure I understand that part. So if the water rights being converted, they take into account consumptive use, hypothetically, they'd be using less water, hypothetically. So in terms of your concern, can you kind of reiterate to me, if they're using less water, what are you worried about? Are you just worried that that's going to be taken away from the ag industry and converted into a different type of use, or what's the concern there?
The concern is I'm business A here. I've bought an agriculture irrigated right. I'm going to turn it into non-irrigated use. They cut me, I have 60% left. Okay, but I need a product supplied to my business A that comes off of irrigated land. A cropping practice. You heard Jarvis talk about 2 corn, 1 wheat, okay? A cropping practice change can come about that where I grow a half circle of corn, half circle of wheat, I as business A go out to that farmer that's doing that and say, I want you to grow me barley in the fall, cut it off in May, plant corn and take it off in August, go right back to barley. What you've done, instead of irrigating maybe 100 days a year, you have the potential to lengthen that irrigation season, which will increase historical use.
Thank you.
How deep sure water?
Great question. I'm glad you asked it. If you look up there on my map where Quivira is at, we have water there, surface water, groundwater, 10 feet or less. You come down to where I live, north of my house, you can't find enough water for a household well. At my house, across the highway, I've got good water for my household. 3 miles south of my house, it's 105 feet to the bottom of the hole. Static water level is at 18 feet. You go another 4 miles south of that, static water level is probably about 23 feet. We don't know where the bottom of the hole is. We drilled it 300 feet and did not run out of gravel. That is another unique thing about our district. I can tell you, I think we were stable this year on our water declines at the GMD. It's a half a foot or less across the district. We're just, like I say, we're fortunate. We're fortunate, I know I am. And I want to protect it.
You're right there at Q stable.
Yes, we are.
Is what we're hearing from the KGS people.
2 to 7% was their number, or 2, I need to know more about that. 2 to 7 was the number. I'm not sure what that represents.
We've kind of already illustrated with the different presenters the variation across the state in depths and where we're at on lots of things. But are there any other questions? Representative Blex.
Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Let's assume a data center comes in as a new business, and I'm assuming they're going to be buying irrigated water rights in order to function that. And from what I gathered from you, you kind of have, and I agree with the historical part, You may seem that, while we think that's a good deal, we may seem that's a little unfair to take away your 40, 50 years working on the farm, and all of a sudden that water right gets consumed, even though we know it's a private right and can be sold or bought. Kind of what's your thought on that?
Thank you for that question. I will answer it this way. I have told my sons at some point in time, they may not irrigate. There may be somebody else that can put their water that they have a right to a better use, a higher value return. That is why, there's two driving reasons the Central Kansas Water Bank was formed. One of them was to create a mechanism where if I had a water right, you had a higher value use for it, you could come to me. I keep my water right, you pay me for it, but you use it, you put it to a higher value use. And we're already doing that. Lease purchases happen. The second one was safety deposit accounts. We put those in to try and kill, use it or lose it. Because that is a problem. That safety water account allows me to go get water in a drought year that I have saved. But the mindset was really there. We had to stop, use it or lose it. It's worked pretty well. I think we've got over 70% of the water rights in there. Very comparable to in my opinion. Safety water deposit account is a prepay account. I have to put the water in before I can ever go get it. The MIFA is the credit card account.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this has really been an eye-opening for having the producers from the different areas. It's really opened up a lot of eyes of how different and how diverse we are and how difficult our job is to balance all those equations. And it's like we all know these data centers will consume huge, huge gallons of water, and that higher value use may be an extreme problem. But I appreciate all your comments so far. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Justin. Next, we have Bill Karp, Sedgwick County. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. I'm Bill Karp. I live on the edge of Wichita, farm in Sedgwick County, also farm in Pratt County. We have irrigation in both locations. I would have to say I'm blessed that we are neither of the places where I irrigate is there a quantity issue at this time. South of Pratt is not over appropriated, and well, neither is the aquifer, Equus beds north of Wichita. After listening to my friends here, I thought maybe I should just get up and say ditto. But I'll try and, I don't know, not fill in the blanks, but maybe give you things to think about when you have issues coming towards you. My deal is with conservation is a good thing. The only problem is it becomes emotional. And my think about this, my reasoning is that the problem with if it's not done right and if it's not thought through, it becomes the reappropriation of water without compensation. LEMAs are a good idea, but they have some things that are problems, the Sheridan 6, as far as I'm concerned. The feedlot in that area did not take a cut when they did that, just irrigation. I'm a fan of livestock. I was a livestock feeder. My family did hogs. I did not farm. I grew up in livestock. I am a fan. But when you start divvying up the water as to who's, quote, the most valuable, and you're doing it by control, not by purchase or such. So you're going to say, well, what are you going to do with the feedlot? They need the feedlot. Ryan, we're first one to testify in our in my visiting with him, he has said, well, we need that feedlot. And I'm like, I don't argue. It's a great thing. There are avenues. The feedlot could purchase it if they need more water. Somebody could give it to, the community could say the feedlot needs the water, let's donate it. But to have what becomes your district and the state approved law that the irrigator is going to cut and the feedlot is not, or the municipality is not, we can't go down that road. We have to be careful to preserve the property right. That's one example. And I've got to, I guess that's mainly what I had notes of, examples of I fear that this is not going to get taken into consideration as it should. A few weeks ago, I believe his name's Brownie with Geological, we did a web meeting, and he was speaking about the feedlot. Now, I'm not picking on feedlots, it just happens to be, these are my anecdotes, this is what I've heard. Feedlot manager at Montezuma was trying to get the area interested in conserving and cutting back their water. And at the end of his talking about this, he was telling about how we were going about it and such. And I said, I had a question. I said, did the feedlot manager feel that he would need to cut back also? And Mr. Brownie says, well, I don't know. I didn't ask him that. And he says, but that's insignificant because it wouldn't be that much water anyway. Well, from the standpoint of the quantity, it's not significant. The irrigators are the bigger quantity, there's no doubt. But it is significant in that the feedlot is not required to take a cut in their water, and the irrigator is, just because he has more, or just because it's not as valuable. It would be valuable if the feedlot needed to pay for it. It would be valuable if the municipality needed to pay for it, but we're going down a road, and I've got examples that it's already happening. We're going down a road where the irrigation water is not as valuable. That corn is not as valuable as a plant making chips. It's not as valuable as all those people in Wichita. They need the water worse than the corn crop. That may be, but as our state is how it's done, is that I have a permit to use that water, and so do other irrigators, and it can be purchased. It could be donated. These options don't seem to be where I'm fear these are not where we're headed. It's more like someone's gonna decide the value here and the value over there, and then we're gonna move it there. As we cut all this water, as Jarvis has spoke about a system of cutting back, good ideas. What I think we need to be really careful of and always think of is when we're doing it, when the irrigator takes a cut, that water's going to have, if there's, and let's assume we cut the water, and let's assume that the aquifer moves back up. Let's assume the water becomes plentiful again. I don't know whether that's 10 years, 100 years. But you're telling the owner right now, he can't have it. And if that water table comes back up later, somebody's going to want that water. And if the water becomes valuable enough, they're going to go use it, and they're going to come get it. You've taken it from this individual now, and someone else is going to get it later. Maybe not, probably not his family, because they were not able to keep it. I guess I'm done. I had more of a deal to go, but when I'm not done. I wanted to, sorry. If Justin doesn't mind, the young lady asked about the consumptive use thing. And I will, if you don't mind, I'll, because it does come into the deal a little bit. What Justin was talking about is, for instance, the feedlot, when they purchased water rights and or the dairy, there's a dairy in that area. And they purchased land with water rights. And the amount of water they can use, it gets lowered. The thing is, so when if you're irrigating a corn crop, let's just use the corn crop because it's the big one. That corn crop needs water from mid-May to September. It's got a window where that corn needs water. And if you've got a well and Justin has told me in that area, there's wells that maybe pump 300, 400 gallons a minute. You've only got so many hours in that window to pump that water. That entire water right does not get used likely because the time period is too short to pull the water out of the ground. If you're pulling it at a lower amount. The dairy itself, they need water 360 days a year. They can pull water out of the ground every single day. They don't have a window where they don't pump the water beyond and before. The dairy can pump it the whole time. There, the consumptive use goes up because of the amount of time that they need the water and can use the water. Does that explain that to you? And to go on in that, and Justin's going to have to tell me yes or no. You have said there is the danger of a Lima, or the possibility of a Lima has been talked about in that same area?
That is true. It depends on the ESI study and how it comes back from the.
So I'm going to throw a scenario for you to think about. A Lima comes in, we've got this dairy, and it has basically increased the consumptive use in that area due to, and also Justin explained that they're growing the crop. They've grown, what he was saying is they've stretched the window of the crop season from the 1st of April or before clear into November, December, whenever the water can run. At the same time, we've increased that water consumption in that area. A Lima comes in and says that the irrigators are going to have to cut back. The dairy's just got this brand new permit. Are they going to cut that dairy? You think? That's not working out well. I'm a fan of the dairy. I love the idea, but the water, the way that's being taken care of and handled is headed down a road that is not capitalism. It's about picking and choosing. And maybe with best intentions. I think some of this is happening by default. But as you find members have things come to you, I would really like that you consider these things. I don't have anything else to say. Well, I probably do, but I'm done.
Any questions? Seeing none, hang around. We'll talk more, I'm sure. But next we have Nathan Mentzer from Allen County. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the House Water Committee. I am Nathan Mentzer from Allen County. I farm along the Neosho River, basically between Leroy and Iola. Today, several of my colleagues have talked about groundwater issues and irrigation. I'm here to talk to you about surface water and the importance of it, as I'm not an irrigator myself, and the importance of the reservoirs in our rural water infrastructure. Just last week, the Kansas Water Office gave a presentation on Kansas reservoirs and water supply security. I have listened to that presentation, and I fully support their ingenuity, their innovation, and the dedication that they're putting in to resolve the sedimentation issues. I do feel that some of the timelines and the impacts being presented seem like they're a long ways in the future. On my farm, my grandfather still tells stories of the 1951 flood and having to go to the neighbors' houses and rescue people off their roofs. Tells stories of the neighbors' 50 hogs washing down the river. This was before John Redmond was put in the 60s. And while it seemed a long way away, I think the presentation said, you know, we have all the way till the 2070s until we go back to pre-dam conditions. And now, living along the Neosho and having farm fields going underwater is pretty common. I mean, it's an every year occurrence. We always say as long as the water recedes within 24 hours, that corn's going to stay, or even sometimes the wheat. But when we call it dam operations, just to inquire about the flooding and conditions and how things are looking upstream, we often get the conversation of them having to choose who they get to flood. You know, are they going to flood people upstream of the reservoir or downstream? This conversation, this line of reasoning seems to be a more and more common decision. I do not envy the dam operators in choosing who gets to get flooded. You know, what communities are going to get impacted. You know, while the floods can destroy our crops and property, you know, there also is the economic limits that lowering the capacity in our reservoirs creates. You know, many of our communities along the Neosho are pulling their water from the Neosho. And, you know, as that capacity is decreasing, some of their ability to offer long-term commitments to maybe economic development or drivers, such as, you know, even as simple as fire protection for, you know, battery energy storage facilities or biofuel plants or other plants coming in. You know, this loss of economic development impacts our agriculture in many ways. I mean, the obvious one is that, you know, by preventing, you know, renewable fuel developers come in and their big water uses, you know, that takes away markets for our grain. But, you know, other economic development also takes away, you know, the families coming to our communities that will have members to hire help from or spouses to work at our local co-ops or banking or insurance and our, you know, and other lending institutions. Lastly is we need that economic development to share the property tax base. I don't want to be just another farmer up here complaining about property tax, but I sure would like to share the burden rather than seeing other people move away from our communities and having more of that property tax burden stay on those that remain. Also, as we dispose of the sediment in the reservoirs downstream, please keep in mind our aging infrastructure of our rural water districts, you know, and of those water treatment plants that may have to deal with that sedimentation and the other impacts. And to closing, I want to impart the sense of urgency in dealing with the sedimentation in the reservoirs. You know, we may not see the impacts of the proposed solutions for several years. You know, we tried, you know, some dredging activities in 2018. You know, the proposed solutions coming up for 2027 look very intriguing, but put those to the scale that we'll need them to prevent great impacts down the road, you know, is just around the corner. You know, I really appreciate it if my kids don't have to come up here and talk about the waterfalls at John Redmond or, you know, our farm being washed away. So, thank you. Are there any questions for me?
Any questions? Seeing none, any questions for any of our other presenters? We do have 10 minutes left. When Jarvis comes in, I guess we have one question for them. This has been very enlightening for me. I know my little area in west central Kansas. We've heard from lots of parts of Kansas here now. It's good to hear from producers, and I got the common sense from all of you that we need to conserve a little bit. We don't want to pick winners and losers, and we're well aware of that. As a livestock producer myself and a crop production farmer, I will give the feed yards and the dairy credit for the reuse and recycle of water that they've done. And if we're looking at beneficial use of water in the long-term future, as a farmer, when I put that sprinkler water out there, if I over-irrigate, I anticipate some of that water might get down to my shale 140 foot deep, but it might take 60 years to do that, to go through the soil, and occasionally there's a clay layer and it'd have to move over and stuff. The recharge and recharge out in my area is very minimal. In GMD 5, it's quite a bit more. In GMD 2, it's even more than that, and partly due to the depth and the structure of the soil and types of soils. But Jarvis, do you have a moment? We have one more question for you.
For my coughing fits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jarvis. You brought up a lot of interesting points, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on a few of them. So I guess, when we talk about GMD3, I think they're kind of at a turning point where there's a conversation about what does the next chapter look like. We have House Bill 2279. They're doing outreach. They're bringing producers together. I'm trying to get a feel for, what is your perception of the desire to do something like a LEMA? And some of the points you made about administration of rights and differentiating based on vested or junior, senior, domestic, whatever it may be. My concern is that, everyone is still running out of water. So with a LEMA, you can bring people together, and I think part of the benefit that we heard about with GMD1 is the sociological benefit of, we're all in this together, we're all gonna be a part of the solution, we're all gonna have a hand in designing what that solution is, versus just having the state come in and define the terms, which I think, we all recognize the state owns the water, and if nothing happens, that may ultimately be part of the solution, but I think there's generally a desire for these locally designed solutions. So I'm kind of curious in your thoughts on that. And then, something else we've heard a number of times today is a lot of these cuts are falling on producers only. But I think part of the reason for that is that the GMD boards are almost entirely composed of producers. So GMD3 does do it better, I think, than some GMDs in terms of they have a municipal rep, they have an industrial rep, they have, but in terms of the representation of those industries, there's less of that on the boards. And those boards are the ones that are coming up with these LEMAs or these other policies that get designed. So I think there's a challenge there in that, if I guess to back up a little bit, I think all beneficial uses can be included in a LEMA. I think the district can decide how that's designed. But I think part of the challenge is representation on the board. You have a board of largely irrigators who would be telling these other beneficial uses how to change their water use, which, I have other thoughts on that, but those are some of my thoughts just in terms of your comments. So I guess what's your response to that, and what do you feel like the general perception is on the ground right now about, in Haskell and Finney counties, we have some of the greatest rates of decline. We have some of the most concerning usable life remaining of the aquifer. So how do we make sure that it's there for future generations? How do we work together to come to a solution?
Yeah. And I haven't studied and researched, but it doesn't take a lot of effort when you just drive around and observe to understand why Finney County and Haskell County have the largest rates of decline. We're overdeveloped. We overdid a good thing. And the reason we did is those two counties have the best soils to produce. And you get south into Seward County, yes, there's some very good productive farm ground, but then you have some rolling grasslands around the Cimarron River Valley. And so it's not total agricultural production. And that's why we see better saturated thicknesses to the south. The formations are better, but then there's not the development that happened there. In terms of the thoughts on LEMAs, as we all know in the state, drawing boundaries is difficult because you always get Well, on this side of the road is Oklahoma, and they get to do X, Y, Z, and I'm on this side of the road in Kansas, and now I have restrictions, or I've got water law that I have to follow. And so with the LEMAs, what I've kind of gathered is GMD3 would be the LEMA. Those boundaries have been drawn. We don't have to argue and fight over, do we go across this section line and down this township line, and then everybody is included in it, and we're not picking winners and losers because if you're here, then you're in it. That's been the biggest common ground is the GMD3 would be the LEMA of GMD3. We wouldn't have 2 or 3 or 4. Now, when you look at DWR's maps and KGS overlays, you can identify areas that are more intensively used, could benefit well from a LEMA. From the farmer groups that I've been around, it just becomes a whole lot of, I don't want to be the one in charge of drawing boundaries. And the GMD3 boundaries there. And so that's what I'd say for LEMAs is I haven't heard a lot of no, as long as it's the whole GMD3.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jarvis. So I guess, and I brought this up a little bit when GMD3 presented. I guess my concern with that is, I think it's challenging to get, GMD3 is the biggest district, so that's a lot of people, it's a lot of counties to get on board, which I'm all for. If we want to do a district-wide LEMA, I think that's an awesome goal. I guess I'm worried, that the needs across GMD3, because it's so large, are very different. There are southern parts of the GMD that have hundreds of years of water left, and you have parts of Haskell and Finney County and Grant County that, some areas have already run out of water, hardly have any water left. And then you have water quality concerns coming down the arc and the alluvial water and things like that. So when we've seen it in other GMDs, it's, maybe started in a township like Sheridan 6, but it becomes a county-wide initiative. There were talks about the Finney-Kearney County LEMA, a number of years ago. And then GMD3 did have the foresight to do the iCare project, which I thought did a great job of breaking out some of the key concerns in the GMD. So I think it is awesome to make the GMD, make the whole GMD part of it. I think that is a great thing for morale, getting everyone on board. We're all working towards the solution. I guess my worry is, are the solutions that come out of that going to be specific enough and frankly good enough to address the challenges ahead? Or will it, kind of be like everyone's on board, but we're only going to do a 5% cut? That's kind of the scenario I'm worried about.
Right, and those are valid and real concerns. And it's not easy, obviously, as you've stated. It's variations in depth to shale, water saturated thickness to the south, and it's, dang, farmers are independent, Don't tell me what to do, just because, nobody likes that. However, it's hard when you are the 80-year-old farmer that's at the end and the land's paid for and you're functioning on cash and you don't have, your hobby is farming. So I'm going to stay here till I die. My kids are gone to wherever, so when I die, then it's selling to whomever. Or you're hopefully in your 20s, you're probably in your 30s, and you want to try to start farming, and you go out and you get the however many hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of land notes and equipment notes, and well, now the only way to pay for this is because of irrigation. Well, two drastically different economic scenarios in those ownerships, and trying to get both sides to come together to figure out how to do it is very difficult. Because if you're selling, you just want highest dollar per acre. And if you're buying, you need it to be as low as possible to make it work. And the sad part is, we're mining the state's water. And some people say, treat the state's water like we treated natural gas and oil. Right at capture, pump it till it's gone, now you're done. It's like, oh, well, that sounds pretty harsh. But, you know, so it's, again, I do not envy your positions and trying to come up with solutions for these. And maybe if nobody's happy, it's the right plan. You know, I mean, that's raising 5 boys. If none of the boys are happy, life's pretty even because nobody won.
Well, thank you for your insights. I really appreciate the opportunity to hear from local farmers from across the state today. I think we all gained a lot from it. So thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I want to thank the producers for coming today. I really appreciate their presentations. I guess a couple takeaways that I have here is that nobody wants to give up something, and we all want to do something for the future. I will tell you personally, I really appreciate LEMAs and WCAs when people voluntarily weren't forced into it. They voluntarily went together. They allowed the feed yard not to take a cut, and yet they took a cut on their irrigation water or anything. They thought they were doing something to benefit their community. Whether they were entirely correct or those that want to pump it before Oklahoma gets it, we'll find out in another 40 years. But I appreciate the input that you guys have given us today and expanded some thinking here on the community or committee. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. On Thursday, we will have a short presentation on PFAS and drinking water from the Department of Health and Environment, and we're going to work Senate Bill 58 on Thursday. We'll have presentations on that. We're going to have a hearing on it. We won't work it until later. And if we can't finish on Thursday, I will, most of the people presenting on that will be here locally. Hopefully we can finish it up on Tuesday after. We have 3 more committee meetings, and I want to make the most of it, but the Senate Bill 58 that's coming up on MIFAs and trying to streamline and make that process easier. Ag producers, we're trying to make things a little easier for multi-year flex accounts so that when you have droughts or you have adequate rainfall, you can manage to the best of your ability. So that's our intention behind that Senate Bill 58. With that, we are adjourned.